Welcome to the Law&Crime Report. I'm Angelica Spanos. Thanks for joining us today. The show where we dive into today's top legal and true crime stories making headlines today. First up, Miya Ponsetto is back in the headlines again. She is the woman who wrongfully accused a black teen of stealing her phone at the Arlo Hotel in Soho back in December. She's now dubbed SoHo Karen, and she didn't appear in court yesterday for a drunk in public charge, but her mother did. Law&Crime's Brian Buckmeyer has more on the most recent developments.
Miya Ponsetto is accused of attacking the 14-year-old son of Grammy Award-winning jazz musician Kenyon Harold at the Arlo Hotel in New York in December.
No, okay, then show me the.
No, you get a life.
Over there. What's on your background?
You better go use find my iPhone. Go do that.
Find My iPhone is on. On that right now.
No.
Detectives say Ponsetto wrongly accused the teen of stealing her iPhone.
We have what you see two black people.
No, I'm not letting him walk away with my phone.
Records show Ponsetto had several other run-ins with the law before. The 22-year-old and her mother, Nicole Ponsetto, were arrested last February at the swanky Peninsula Hotel in Los Angeles. Miya was arrested for public intoxication. Her mother was charged with battery of a police officer.
Defendant 1 stated that she believed she was defending. Defendant 2 resisted arrest from a Beverly Hills police officer and kicked the officer in the knee. The report states there's some redness on the officer's knee.
Miya Ponsetto is also facing DUI and resisting arrest charges in her home county of Ventura. The LA judge has agreed to dismiss the public intoxication charge.
Well, in this case, Your Honor, there's no criminal history outside of a 2020 DUI in California. The declination policy doesn't allow for any exceptions or factors for consideration, and I believe the policy requires me to state that it's in the interest of justice.
As for mother Nicole, she'll have to serve 100 hours of community service over the next year and stay away from the Peninsula Hotel before her charges will be dropped in this case.
To the charge on count 1, violation of 243B, battery on a peace officer, how do you plead?
No contest.
And you understand that a no contest plea has the same force and effect as a guilty plea?
I understand that.
All right, Brian, thank you. So Miya Ponsetto is from California. This week, we just heard the judge there decided to drop a charge against her because the prosecutor said that she had no criminal history up to her conviction last year dealing with that incident. The new incident here in New York, that happened this past December. Let's bring in our guest today who's going to break all of this down. We have Ricard Chambers, a former prosecutor, and Brian Dunn, a managing partner at the Cochran firm. Thank you both for being with us here today. Leslie, I'll come out to you first. React on the judge dropping this charge against Ponsetto.
Well, I think that this probably means that he found that the mother was likely more culpable in this situation. And I don't know all of the facts and details surrounding the details of the case, but Miya has definitely had some run-ins lately with individuals, law enforcement and non-law enforcement, and this is probably his opportunity to give her a break, considering that she doesn't have a criminal history.
And going off the fact that she doesn't have a criminal history, but now obviously has been making headlines with her new incident here at the hotel in New York. Do you think had that incident in New York happened around the same time or during that time frame before she saw a judge based on the DUI, that this outcome would be different, Brian?
Well, you got to look at it in terms of what's really going on here. These are misdemeanor charges, and usually misdemeanor charges are not going to be newsworthy. You're not talking about serious jail time. But what makes this case interesting to people is that this is yet another case, long line of cases in which you've got a false accusation against a man of color from another person who's usually white, saying that this person did some nefarious act, and that's why we need to get law enforcement involved. Those two instances, though, are going to be completely separate in the minds of the judge. But it is important to note that all of these crimes are relatively low-level crimes. But if you get enough low-level crimes racked together in a short enough time span, you could be actually looking at state prison. So that's why she's got to get a handler or something now.
All right, Brian, Leslie, thank you. We're going to listen now to the defense attorney, I believe. Sorry, the defense lawyer. Let's hear what he had to say.
Please.
You've spent some time with these clients.
I have.
You've seen all these other things develop that,
Yes.
Eventually she could serve some time because of all the effects of all these things. I wonder, do you sense from the client, about Miya, do you sense that she's remorseful or that she's changed Miya, that she's changed her mind in any way about how she's dealt with the media about this and Gail and, the family in New York?
So I can only speak to what I know, and I do want to preface this. I knew you guys were waiting, and I felt it was appropriate for me to give you some sort of statement to provide some closure for the California angle. I will not be talking about any case she has in New York. As you know, I'm a California lawyer. I'm not a New York lawyer, and I'm not representing her in New York because that's not my case. I can't speak to that. I can tell you that Miya is keeping herself very busy. She's doing well. She's with her mom, and that's what I know. Obviously, the entire purpose of everything that we've done, even the Gayle King interview, was to express remorse and to deliver an apology. That is what the purpose of that was. So, as you saw, Nicole was here, and they don't want any of this publicity. They're not seeking it. They're not seeking the fame or anything, and she easily could have stood here and walked and talked with you folks, but she told me in advance she had an appointment and she had to leave.
All right, so that's the defense lawyer there, and she's talking about Miya being remorseful, how she's changed her actions since. Brian, what do you make of her statement there?
This reminds me of the Lindsay Lohan case in a lot of different ways, because what you basically have is a situation where there's a little too much alcohol involved, a little too many times, too often, and all of a sudden you start having problems with the law that become compounded. The idea that she's actually showing remorse through her attorney, though, is something that you have to take into consideration. And this idea that she's at an appointment, that just doesn't fly. If the client has the remorse in her heart, it's always a better idea for the public to see the client directly, because really that's what people need. They need a sense of closure, and they need this person to say, I am sorry for accusing this Black man of doing this. I was a little bit off my rocker that day. That's all she needs to do to skate through this, provided she doesn't keep doing the same thing. But I really think she should have had her client say it herself as opposed to her. It's just my thought.
Well, she did go on that interview. She went on network television and sat down and did an interview and didn't apologize, as you're saying. I think she was actually very short, and a lot of people saying that interview was terrible for her image and for what she did, because she did not conduct herself well during that. I don't know if you saw the interview, Leslie, but based off what Brian said, what do you think of that?
I agree with the both of you 100%. And I was, sitting here thinking earlier that she has shown herself to be a very arrogant, very obtuse young lady. And even with that clip that you just showed with Gayle King and her lawyer sitting with her, when she made the hand gesture to Gayle, her lawyer gave her that look as if she was extremely concerned with what her potential next words or gestures would be. It was just highly inappropriate. And Brian is absolutely correct. If you are trying to present this presentation of being, or you want the message of being remorseful to be received, then you really need to show remorse. And there has been nothing since the SoHo incident that I believe that people, even the courts, would perceive as remorseful. And I'll tell you this too, it is probably a good idea that she didn't come to court. Because as a former prosecutor, I can tell you that if I ever had someone that I was prosecuting who came to court making hand gestures, giving me attitude, it was probably not going to be a good day for them strategically. So,
Great point,
she's
Leslie.
got to be
Great point.
more considerate of her actions moving forward.
Absolutely.
Right. And based off that, Brian, do you think that she didn't come to court? Do you think that was a planned move by her attorney?
Well, Leslie just made so many great points from the voice of a prosecutor. I'm starting to now think that there's probably a reason for this. She would rather take the easy blow of the attorney saying the apology instead of the client than the gigantic blow of the client possibly screwing things up even worse by either giving a remorseless apology or actually taking it to another level. There's some folks you can't control, and everybody knows that. So this might be an instance of a lawyer just doing the best damage control that she can under the circumstances. But those are some great points, Leslie.
It's interesting because you heard her attorney in that piece of sound we played for you say that she wasn't interested in the fame. And it is also another worth noting that right after she did that interview with Gayle King, that's when they filed the charges against her. So unclear if that led, I'm not sure if, they led to
Some
that,
folks
but
don't love the
the
camera.
timing there is worth noting.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. Good point, Angelica.
All right. All right, Brian and Leslie, thank you so much. We're going to take our first break right now. When we come back, we'll talk more of today's top headlines. Stay with us after this. And welcome back. Making headlines today is Casey Anthony. You might not have heard that name for a while, but you'll recall that the 34-year-old mom was acquitted of murdering her daughter, Kaylee, in a trial that captivated the nation back in 2011. Now, Anthony is opening a private investigation firm. This is according to People magazine, who has reported on this story. And they say that she filed documents in December listing herself as a registered agent of Case Research and Consulting Services, LLC. Now, the business is registered to a West Palm Beach home that's owned by Patrick McKenna, who was Anthony's lead investigator on her defense team back in 2011. State records show that Anthony does not have a Florida private investigator's license because as a convicted felon, she's unable to get one. Brian, coming to you first, what do you think of this? I don't know if anyone really saw this one coming.
This is probably something that that's such a great point, Angelica. Nobody's going to see this coming, but you got to look at a couple of things. Number one, McKenna, who was her lead investigator back in the 2011 proceedings, he is a awesome private investigator. He has been around for years and years and years. And the idea that the company that they've started is somehow going to have some legitimacy because it is attaching to her name is a very interesting concept because she doesn't even have the license to be a PI in the very state where this is happening. It's at Pat McKenna's home. It's registered to him. But what could be happening is they're trying to drum up some publicity surrounding this new firm so that the phone will ring. And that could really be why this is motivating all of this. Just business.
And another thing is she still maintains that she's innocent. And when asked about this, I believe she said that, or, the folks speaking on her behalf involved said she knows what it's like to be accused of something that she didn't do. And she wants to help other wrongfully accused people, especially women, and get them justice. So as you said, do you think it's this name attachment? Maybe they're hoping that other high profile convicted people may come toward them for their business?
Angelica, you're bringing up some wonderful ideas, but the idea that we're even talking about it, I think was the goal all along, is that so people will actually generate a buzz surrounding this. But I will say that there is some there because Pat McKenna is one of the best investigators in the country. And whether he's getting people to call his name because of the Casey Anthony situation or for other reasons, they're going to, I know this guy personally, and he's really good.
All right. And Leslie, based off what Brian's saying is, publicity is good publicity here. But what about this bringing some negative attention? Because this was a very contested trial. Everyone in America was glued to watching this. Everyone had their own theories, their own thoughts. So doesn't this also bring them negative attention?
It could. It very well could. And the question becomes, what type of clients are they wanting to attract here? Are they wanting to attract the type of clients who get accused or arrested for crimes that are, that they feel like are questionable without merit? And if she truly believes that she was innocent, then maybe those are the types of people that she attracts. And this is just mind blowing. To be honest with you, I find it very interesting that a reputable firm is associating themselves with her as a business partner in any regard, and taking the risk of losing those credible clients.
Right.
Right, and she also made it clear that she was not doing this to look back and investigate the death of her 2-year-old daughter. So she definitely, they put that out there, making that clear that it wasn't for that case, which, Leslie, is also interesting.
Right. And
absolutely. I mean, you can't help but to think that, though, right? I mean, anyone with any remote knowledge of who she is and why she is in the media or was in the media at all, reasonably believes that the sole reason for her starting this is not necessarily related to her inability to find employment anywhere, but it's because she's got a personal motive for trying to re-urge her innocence from her original case.
And there it is. That's such a great point, because
Brian.
the world sees her as guilty. I'm so sorry, Angelica, if I jumped in, but the world sees this lady as being guilty, even though the jury acquitted her on some of the most significant charges. This was a situation where the prosecution didn't prove their case. It's not that she was proven to be factually innocent by any stretch of the imagination. And so when you look at what people are thinking, she is still seen as guilty of the worst crime imaginable in the eyes of the public. And we can't lose sight of that. And Angelica, I'm sure you were alluding to that earlier.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're going to switch gears right now. 2 Kenosha, Wisconsin police officers who were present during the shooting of Jacob Blake have returned to the job as of January 20th. Now, the officers did not use deadly force against Blake, and the 2 had been on administrative leave since August 23rd, which was the day of the shooting. And Blake, who's now paralyzed, was shot in the back multiple times by a different officer. That officer is still on administrative leave. Let's listen now to the Kenosha DA announcing the no charges, against the officers.
Today, there's a very narrow decision that must be made. And so I will be announcing today the question of whether the district attorney's office in its professional judgment feels that there is sufficient admissible evidence to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Officer Shesky or any of the other Kenosha officers shot Jacob Blake unlawfully or committed any other offense. That's the task. It's a narrow task today. It's a legal and professional task. But I want to say that I feel in many ways completely inadequate for this moment. I have never in my life had a moment where I had to contend with explicit or implicit bias based on my race. I have never had a moment in my whole life where I had to fear for my safety with either police officers or individuals in authority. And yet I have had conversations with people that I trust and admire who tell me they do have that life experience. So that is an authentic experience I do not have and I do not bring to this decision today. And it is my decision now that I announce today before you that no Kenosha law enforcement officer in this case will be charged with any criminal offense based on the facts and the laws as I will describe them to you now. So it is our decision that no charge will be filed. I'm going to also tell you, just because I think it is important, that no charge will be filed against Jacob Blake in regards to this incident as well. For many of the same reasons, in terms of an overall discussion about this case, that is not something that the district attorney's office intends to pursue.
All right, so that's the DA there talking about how they declined to charge the officer that did the shooting, as well as the other two officers involved that we spoke about. And the reason why is because that officer could successfully argue self-defense because Blake had a knife. He also makes a point of saying that they did not charge Blake, who, again, had the knife. So this is from earlier this month. Brian, weigh in on this and your thoughts.
I've always wondered where this mysterious knife came from. I haven't ever really seen any direct evidence that he was wielding it in a way that would cause a reasonable officer to fear for his safety, which is going to be the standard for the use of deadly force. But the deeper issue is they know that there's going to be a public outcry. And I do applaud the DA was saying that, look, the buck stops with me. It's my decision. Fire your hatred at me. We have decided to do this. That takes a lot of courage in today's political climate. But you got to just understand how subjective a criminal prosecution is inherently. You could have the Breonna Taylor case that goes to a grand jury, and those were officers that were being fired upon before they returned fire. And this is a situation with an officer that is clearly, there's a very strong argument can be made that he's not in harm's way at all, but he still uses deadly force repeatedly, mortally injuring this young man, Jacob Blake. But the idea is that sometimes a criminal prosecution happens and sometimes it doesn't. That's completely up to the prosecuting agency that is responsible for this event. And it's not necessarily about what people feel is right or what people feel is wrong. And this is one of those situations where he's saying a hard stop and, buck stops with me. I just don't see enough. The reality is he doesn't think the case can be easily won. And he doesn't want that loss. If it comes down, he doesn't want that loss on his career.
Right. And when you talk about the public outcry, if it did end up being a case and, it couldn't be won or whatever, there'd probably be another series of public outcry. So it's sort of just like stopping it before it gets too far ahead, right?
Right. Exactly. Hey, you nailed it. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. This is going to be a rough day, maybe a rough couple of days. But what he's trying to do is get this media cycle to pass this over and have some other things being discussed so that he can stop being in the hot seat.
And one of the things that is unique to this, but maybe not so unique anymore, is a lot of this was shot on cell phones. That was spread across social media and, of course, started this national dialogue. And then later on, there was another shooting in Kenosha, which we've talked about here on the show with Kyle Rittenhouse. So they've all sort of snowballed. And a lot of this is due to the fact that everyone has a recording device in their hand, which I said unique before. I almost want to say it's not unique anymore.
I think you were right. It is still unique because we had the footage that actually captured every aspect of the critical moment. A lot of times, even cell phones, they kind of miss the actual action. But, we're living in a different age. And I think that that's one of the important things, Angelica. You are talking about something that is in our world now that didn't used to be. And that is that any officer can be recorded anytime doing or saying anything. And I do agree with your initial assessment, Angelica. This is unique right now. And this is a reality, though, that we're going to have to get used to.
And another thing I wanted to ask you about is the officer who actually shot Blake. He's on leave, but there are no charges against him. So if he's returned to work and cleared to return to work, do you think that the public, how is the public going to react to that?
That's a great question, but you got to understand, back to your original point, Angelica, if this is not caught on tape, none of these discussions ever occur. The criminal charge won't even be discussed. It'll be an afterthought. He's never going to be charged. He would be back at work now. All three officers would be back at work now. this would be business as usual. The reason why we are having all of these discussions and really delving into all of these issues is because we saw the videotape. Everybody's seen the videotape. It strikes a lot of people as being wrong. Most of the time, the event's not videotaped. And when it's not videotaped, it's business as usual. And you don't have a criminal discussion about him working. Whether he goes back to work or not is going to be a decision that should be prolonged for as long as possible. The reason is you want there to be the impression that we are really thinking hard about what we're going to do. Reality is they probably made the decision months ago. But this is the type of thing that you have to really play slowly in terms of the employment situation, because the idea of criminal prosecution stands distinct from, is he going to get his job back? Either way, he's in a lose-lose situation. If he puts him back on the street, he's going to have one faction that's going to be mortally upset with him. If he takes him off the street, you're going to have a problem with the police unions and all of these other issues that are people he's dealing with on a daily basis. So this is complicated, but it's complicated because of a handheld video. We can't lose sight of that.
Right, absolutely. Another story involving a cell phone video. How many times will we go down this road again? All right, Brian, we're going to take a break right now. We come back. Plenty more. Stay with us here on
All right, thank you, Angelica.
All right, welcome back to Law and Crime. At the center of stock market mayhem this week is a trading app called Robinhood, stock in GameStop, and a Reddit message board. You've probably heard about this story. A pair of federal lawsuits now was filed alleging that Robinhood engaged in market manipulation. This as it began restricting transactions on stocks that had been driven up through unprecedented efforts by users in a Reddit group. The group banded together to drive up purchase prices for GameStop, AMC, BlackBerry, and Nokia. The Robinhood app played a role in allowing the Reddit users to easily purchase those shares, but in the middle of executing and doing their strategy, Robinhood ended up halting trades in those stocks and only allowed users to close out their existing positions and didn't allow them to buy or make any new purchases. That stoppage led to immediate backlash. There's now at least 2 lawsuits being filed. I'm sure more to come. Brian Dunn and Leslie Ricard with us here. Leslie, coming to you first. What do you think of this story and, of course, the legal angle here, which is now lawsuits being filed against Robinhood?
So this mess has been going on all week, Angelica and Brian, and I've been following it because, look, I am a Robinhood user, but I also hold stocks in the more traditional stock holder agencies. But the problem with Robinhood is, Robinhood is supposed to be based on the notion that, you have an opportunity here for the everyday person who is not a part of the institution to now participate in the stock market. And so with Robinhood being one of those entities that restricted this potential profit making for the what's called the retail investor, you and I, folks who are not a part of institutions, by them placing those restrictions on their accounts, it gives the idea to these users that Robinhood is not doing what its business was created to do, and that's to create financial opportunity for everyday people.
Right. Good point.
Right. And, Robinhood is an app, so they obviously have some sort of terms of service when you sign up for the app. When you use the app, you have to agree to their terms of service.
Right.
So my question for you, Brian, is, are they covered for something like this? Because it seems like that they sort of pulled the rug out under the traders, the retail traders, halfway through this strategy that they had planned.
They absolutely did, Angelica. And, does anybody ever read all of those things that are in the fine print before they say accept? It's like that old South Park reference. We're not going to talk about that. But the idea is, people want to buy and they can't buy because the app's not letting them do it. That is going to create a sense of profound righteous indignation and profound outrage because they're wanting to do something and they're not able to do it. And this is part of the problem when you start unleashing that beast of, okay, we're going to get together and we're going to make this thing go up and up and up. It might just take off worse than you think. You might just have created a situation that you can't stop. And when you're having to introduce these internal mechanisms to stop people from doing what they normally would do in a market situation, which is buy and sell securities, now you have implicated the wrath of entities such as the Security Exchange Commission and all of these other folks. And what it really kind of shows is maybe this whole Trojan horse thing or Robinhood thing, whatever you want to call it, maybe it wasn't thought through all the way. What if it works better than we thought it was going to work? Yes, it did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And you brought up the SEC because the CEO of Robinhood has now obviously been making the rounds on television. He came out with a statement. He put out a series of tweets, and he's basically pointing the finger at the SEC and saying that it's all their regulations, their clearinghouse deposits, and saying that he has to meet those. So does he have a fiduciary responsibility to clients on his app, Brian?
Well, the idea is this is happening because people don't know what's going on. And there is this idea that maybe I agreed to something when I hit I agree that is keeping me from being able to function as a participant on this app. And I want to buy more of this and I can't. It is the restriction of freedom that triggers all of this kind of thing. And their conceptualization of wrongdoing, it basically is, they're saying, look, we're just like every other player in this market. You don't come at the big boys when they do this kind of thing. Why are you coming at us when we do this kind of thing? Hence the name Robinhood. Yes. We take from the rich and we give to the poor. The problem is the rich are going to come at you pretty hard if you even have the specter of doing something underhanded. And, you know, from a group that touts itself as being an outsider, that represents the little guy, we give the investor, the regular working Joe investor, a chance. This creates problems when you have an awful lot of money at stake that you did not intend would be at stake. And that's why we're starting to see the snowball effect that Leslie pointed to, that Leslie referenced earlier.
The stock market has, you know, its own beast, you know, yes. and there's a reason yes. why everyday people have not participated in it is because right. it really goes over your head, number one, and number two, unless you've got deep pockets, ordinarily this isn't an industry that you're going to get yourself involved in. And good so point. In the wake of COVID, with people losing their jobs and people potentially losing their homes and not knowing if they're going to be able to put food on the table, keep the lights on, keep the water running, you know, people were trying to establish streams of income, new streams of income that they could potentially, you know, not find themselves subjected to the consequences of COVID, you know, not finding great themselves point. in yes. financial dire straits. And so to feel as though they have been disenfranchised again, you know, the question that every everyday person has is, well, when will my opportunity come? And if the big banks can right. cry wolf, then, you know,
Leslie, I've got to cut you off now.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Sorry about that. I go off on a tangent
Absolutely.
On these things all the time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. We could talk about this one for a while, but we've got to switch gears right now. Moving on, in Austin, Texas, pediatrician diagnosed with terminal cancer shot another doctor before turning the gun on himself. According to Austin police, they first received a call saying that a man walked into a medical office with a gun and was holding hostages inside. Negotiators arrived at the scene and they tried to make contact with the doctor. After being unsuccessful, they went inside and found the doctor as well as another doctor dead. We know that the doctor, Bharat Naramchi, had visited the office a week prior to the shooting and had applied for a volunteer position. And other than that visit, police have no connection between the two people. This obviously a sad story here. Leslie, your reaction to that?
I'll tell you that the reaction here in Baton Rouge has been extremely sad. That doctor is actually from Baton Rouge, was educated at LSU, and you know, it's so heartbreaking for someone to do all the right things, go to school, find equity in this world, and find a job that gives them purpose to have their lives ended here, and to have their families impacted in this way. And I'm just I am praying for these families. I'm praying for the people who love her. It's just absolutely sad.
Yeah, and as I said, they weren't able to connect the two. We know that he had terminal cancer himself. So going off that, Brian, I'm just curious on your thoughts on this. As he said, it's just really unfortunate.
Well, she just probably Leslie captured all of the emotions and all of what the public is going through, which in the words that she just gave us. This is a guy that will never be able to get inside his actual motivations, but he's been basically told that he's going to die. It's just a matter of time. And he is probably acting in response to that type of conceptualization that he doesn't have a lot of time here. He goes to apply for a job at this particular facility. He doesn't get the job, and he decides that he's going to do this deplorable act. My understanding is that he went in there clearly with guns drawn. He was going to take some hostages. He let a lot of people go. He let most of the staff and the medical staff go, but he kept some hostages, children, and this doctor was left behind. Well, what we'll never know is why kill her. She did absolutely nothing to him. She's probably not responsible for the denial of his application, because it wouldn't reach as high up as to her. But you're going to kill yourself. You have all of these feelings that are coming crashing down on you. But why take the life of a completely innocent person? It does nothing. And I completely echo the sentiments of Leslie, because now we see yet another just needless loss of life. There is no answer. We can't talk about it in terms of gun control, which people like to talk about. That's not really directly implicated. We can't talk about it in terms of anything else, except it's just one of those horrible things that we have to somehow try to make sense of.
All right, Brian, Leslie, thank you for that. We're taking another break right now. We come back. Our last topic of the day here. Stay with us after this. And welcome back. An infamous face from the raid at the U.S. Capitol, the shirtless man who was wearing a fur hat with horns, returned to D.C. again. But this time he was brought there by U.S. Marshals. Jake Angeli, as he's called, was initially charged in Arizona, but now he's in custody in D.C. per request by a federal judge. He's facing 6 charges related to his insurrection on January 6th. And as charged, he would face 28 years in prison. Law&Crime's Jeanette Levy has more on the story.
The investigation is far from over. More people are being arrested, and grand juries are returning indictments. The self-proclaimed QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley, has been moved from a jail in Arizona to Washington, D.C. His lawyer told a St. Louis TV station that Chansley regrets, quote, being duped by Trump. Albert Watkins said something similar to Law and Crime.
There is an alternate universe that happens to exist in this world, and sometimes some people embrace it and they move forward with it, and they have an issue.
Chansley has been indicted by a grand jury in D.C. and faces 28 years in prison if convicted. He's accused of leaving a threatening note for Vice President Mike Pence, saying it's only a matter of time. Justice is coming. A grand jury has also indicted 3 members of the Oath Keepers, an anti-government militia group. Court records show photos of Jessica Watkins, Donovan Crowell, and Thomas Caldwell at the U.S. Capitol. They're accused of planning their attack, charged with conspiracy, destruction of government property, and obstruction of an official proceeding. And a new arrest, Thomas Frederick Allen of California. He's also a member of a far-right militia group, the 3 Percenters. Allen is accused of stealing papers from Senator Mitch McConnell. And the leader of the Proud Boys, an all-male neo-fascist group, was arrested 2 days before the Capitol attack, accused of vandalizing a Black Lives Matter banner at a historic Black church. A judge actually banned him from Washington, D.C. Reuters reports that Enrico Tarrio was, quote, a prolific informant for local and federal law enforcement years ago. Meanwhile, the FBI and ATF are offering a $75,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest of a person who left pipe bombs in the nation's capital. One of the heads of the FBI in Washington, D.C., says that more than 400 suspects have been identified through 200,000 tips. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Anjanette Levy.
All right, thanks, Anjanette. That was the update here on all of these people charged. I do want to mention that Angeli's full name is Jacob Anthony Angeli Chansley. So many names there. He's been going by different ones. Brian, coming out to you first. We know that there was potentially an upgrade to some of these charges going to happen by the FBI. Do you see that that's going to happen in the future, or what do you think?
Well, we already have enough charges that can sustain a 28-year conviction. I think that one of the issues that's really happening behind the scenes here is this was initially met with a perception that these crimes would not be prosecuted. It was initially met with a perception that if you're a white male and you're on the right side of this whole thing, you can march into the Capitol, you can preside over a situation in which property is destroyed, and nothing's going to happen to you. The reality is completely different. The fact that things didn't happen immediately does not mean that they are not going to happen. As anyone who has ever dealt with a federal prosecution could attest to, they're finding these folks based on snippets from videotapes. They're closing in on them. This man was in Arizona, and I love the way you said it, Angelica, when you said this time he was brought to D.C. by U.S. Marshals. That was very well said. And when you start thinking about all of these issues, the slow reality is that Mr. Trump's not with you anymore. If he's saying that he felt deceived by Trump, Trump said, I'll be with you. He's not really with him. And even after the Biden administration, even if it's 8 years or the next administration, he may still be in a federal prison. So the idea is that you're going to have to be responsible for your actions, even if you were caught up in a political movement and an emotion that turned out to be based in a false reality. The jail time is real.
Right. And you know, this raid left 5 people dead, including a police officer. It also obviously delayed Congress that day. So a lot of implications from this. And Leslie, I want to get to you before the show's over here. So just quickly weigh in on this in about a minute and a half here.
Well, I think that your last point about identifying those officers who lost their lives trying to protect our congressmen, our legislators, those lives were lost. Their families deserve justice. The United States deserve justice. And I am glad that our nation is moving forward with properly prosecuting those people who are responsible for those deaths and ultimately the overall insurrection.
Absolutely. And, you know, going off the fact that we mentioned how they're finding these people based on photos and video from that day. Do we know how difficult it is to track down people like that using that method? I know people have been questioned and friends and family, but is that like Brian said earlier, I'm assuming it's a lengthy process.
Well, here's the thing about the internet and social media nowadays. People tell all of what they do on social media. They share all their thoughts. And some of these people have made it easier for the government to be able to establish those links and determine who the next suspect is who participated in the riots of the Capitol. And so I do appreciate the federal government, federal prosecutors for making sure that they have all of their ducks in a row ahead of time.
Right.
But, you know, honestly.
Leslie, thank you so much. Leslie, Ricard Chambers, Brian Dunn, thank you as well. Coming up after the break, more of our regular scheduled programming on Law and Crime.